everyone. You are listening to the Minding Mind podcast, where we live life with ease, connection, and permission to just be. I'm your host, Evelyn LeVasseur, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I am sitting down with a special guest, Dr. Laura Jurgens, to talk all about playing your way to more intimacy. And I cannot wait to get deeper into this topic. First, let me tell you a little bit more. Dr. Laura Jurgens is an intimacy and relationship coach. She is the host of the Sex Help for Smart People podcast. Laura specializes in helping people connect better to themselves and their partners and play their way to better intimacy. She uses experiential practices to enable clients to build joyful confidence. Her approach is practical, research-based, inclusive, and de-shaming. She is dual certified in cognitive and somatic coaching and is a former research scientist and biology professor. You can find her at laurajurgens.com. Laura, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Evelyn. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I'm really excited to get into this conversation because I feel like intimacy is something that we all crave in our relationships, but really are not at all versed in how to get the thing that we feel we need. So this is going to be a goodie.
Yeah, it is hard to find good information out there too.
Yeah.
You know, you can get the Cosmos, the same old 14 sex positions gold. And that's not real intimacy, right? Most of us want connection, affection. We want maybe novelty. And yeah, we might want some new spicy stuff. And we might want to overcome some sexual repression that most of us are carrying around because of the culture that we live in. But it's hard to find good help. And we think that we have to kind of go sit and talk to a therapist about our dad for, years at a time or something. And it's hard to figure out how to bring it into our relationship and not feel sort of pathologized about it.
Okay, listen, you already brought up so much. Let's start really quickly. How did you go from research in biology to this line of work? And then we have to just hop into this.
Okay. So I am a person who's had a very windy path in life. I had a lot of childhood trauma. I was homeless. I was a train hopping hobo. I've been a farm laborer. I've had so many jobs. And then I put myself through college and I love science. I love biology. I love conservation science, which is what I did. And yet I really didn't like being a professor. I did not enjoy the bureaucracy. I didn't enjoy the sort of real patriarchal structure. All the women in my department were paid less than the men.
Yeah.
And supporting my graduate students was really challenging. They were not supported well by the university. So I kind of felt like I was part of the problem as much as I tried to be part of the solution. So while I was doing that, I did a lot of self-healing to be a woman in science. I was usually the only woman in my department. And I had to do a lot of work on myself to feel confident enough to get the grant money, to do the work, to ask for what I needed, right? To step into the room and own it. And I went to coaching to do that. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with it so much and used it to help all of the women in my sphere, all of the people of color, of which there were very few in marine conservation science, people with disabilities who felt almost invisible in that space, and just really help build all the marginalized folks up, including myself, with these tools. And because I loved it so much, as I realized that this was just not a good job fit for me, that I really wanted to have impacts in a different way in the world, I really did a deep dive into somatic and intimacy, relationship, sexuality healing, because I'd had a lot of sexual trauma too. There was so much pervasive sexual trauma in the university system in the United States that it really took me that direction, especially during the pandemic and lockdown. I really did a deep dive into building a community and clientele, working on these kinds of things, and got all my certifications and things like that. So then I left academia and I basically self-liberated myself from a job that just wasn't a good fit into a job that is absolutely wonderful. And I love working with my clients. It's so satisfying. I just taught a giant workshop on de-shaming with 60 people this weekend, and it was so beautiful to see people just light up and walk out lighter in themselves. So it's very, very satisfying for me, and that's why I do it.
Yeah, I'm sure that it has to be satisfying, especially coming from a place of someone who's walked the walk, right? Everything that you said, I resonate with, except for the train jumping, because I've never done that before.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. It's very not safe.
I've never done that before.
Like, nobody take this as a good idea. It's very not safe. I met a lot of people who lost limbs, so just
Yeah, I can only imagine. But just the thought of being raised, I feel like it doesn't matter how the lessons were taught to you. For so many women, the lessons are the same. You don't want to stand out too much. You want to be seen as nice. You don't want to be combative. You shouldn't voice your opinions too much, or you'll be seen as abrasive or as a bitch. Like, there is so much to being a female that gets disregarded in every workplace, in the sense of you just having an opinion or a strong opinion at all is seen as a character flaw, right?
Mhm.
Where for a male, it's seen as a strength. Like, so the fact that you were able to recognize it in those moments, right? And then choose to leave that profession and do something that lights you up instead and helps liberate other women in the process is such a testament to like who you are, but also the impact that you're having on other people. I wish, I wish I could flash forward 30 years when I see like our work really showing up, because the ripple spreads, like I would love to see where women are 30 years from now. And I look forward to that day. But I love to also be part of this conversation and part of the change and part of knowing, like, having my daughters here and saying, like, I know things feel a certain way, but we don't have to own that. That doesn't have to be our story. You get to choose for yourself. You don't have to stay in places or in jobs or relationships that make you feel any less than. Like, just having that awareness to help other women have it too. And I love that. I love that for all of us.
So much. So 100%. I'm celebrating everything you just said.
All of it.
I love that you have this vision looking forward, because I do think each of us has such an exponential impact that we can't see, and every step that we take to heal ourselves is is a step of leadership, right? And it impacts people around us, whether it's our children, whether it's, people on the street, whether it's just people in our family. There's little ripple effects we can't see on a day-to-day basis. So the leadership now is so important, and the self-leadership, but also how exciting it is to imagine the leadership of the next generation too, and how they take this forward. So I love all of that, and I love thinking about that.
Yeah, I have this visual in my mind of I get to impact people without even having to do anything extra. It's just I wake up and I am Evelyn, and that is good enough, and it makes somebody's day better, right? Like, I have that idea in my mind, but I also have, like, I'm a visual girl, and I picture when I'm in a room full of people and I open my mouth, whether I impact them immediately and directly is irrelevant. I know that my words are planting seeds, right? And being this visual girl, I like to think that I'm going to walk out of that room, and one day I'm going to come back and it's going to be full of flowers. I planted those seeds. They got to grow and nurture them. And I had an impact that made an entire room more beautiful, which then made their lives,
Absolutely.
right? Like, just the work
Yeah.
that we're doing, impacting individual women, but we never just impact ourselves.
And some people, think it's really easy to think, especially if you're socialized as a woman, that investing in yourself and your own healing, investing money, investing time, investing effort, prioritizing it is somehow selfish.
Yeah.
And it is the opposite. Walking through life as a woman who loves herself is a profound act of revolution, and is just a beautiful example that is a gift to the world.
Mhm.
It also feels really way better.
So
It just feels really way better. We were talking before we started the recording. I was so enjoying just that, like, that feeling of not having the energy sap. Like when you get sort of over the hump and you don't have that energy sink of waking up saying horrible things to yourself all day, trying to be different, feeling like you're not enough in every situation, just like that it's such an energy drain. And I didn't even realize how bad it was. Like just the body image, right? Just the amount of time and effort I spent breaking myself down. I get all that back now.
yeah,
I still have to do a little maintenance because we don't walk through the world without getting body shamed as women all the time.
right.
So I'm still like, oh, wait a second, something creeped in there, you
Hmm.
know. But now it's like it's like low level maintenance. It's not that heavy amount of just like my whole day.
Yeah.
I can't even walk by a mirror without getting sort of like this energy sucked out of me by all these socialized messages of who I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to look like.
Yeah. I think now I'm at the point where, because I did battle with like that body drain for so long, that now when I hear people comment about other women's bodies, my mind no longer goes to me. It immediately says, oh, wow, you're carrying a lot of shit. That must be really heavy, right? Like that sucks. It really
Yeah.
sucks to be carrying that, but that's not my story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not my
You give it
thing.
back, which is the whole thing about your podcast, which I love, right?
Yeah.
We were able to separate, okay, that's not mine. No,
Yeah.
none of it was ever that's not who we are inside. We weren't born these little creatures with like shame.
Yeah.
We were born free of that. And so reclaiming it is just this beautiful process and it is a gift to the world. So if any of you needed that message today, I hope you heard it.
Yes, yes. I say that to my friends all the time. Like, you are not just gifted, you are a gift, right? You are the gift. Like, walk around knowing that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, Laura, let's talk a little bit about how this programming, this idea of like for everyone
Like
else,
playing, yeah.
caring for everyone else,
Mhm.
ignoring your own needs, like that's the idea of being a good woman. How does that now impact your connection and ability to be intimate in the way that you desire?
Yeah. So I see this a lot. And it is really, really common. A lot of women in particular are people pleasing in the bedroom.
Mm.
And we've gotten a habit of thinking that sex is for somebody else. It's not really for us. We've never really figured out what we like, what we want. We may never have gotten what we want, or we may have gotten it in little bits and pieces. We may not be getting and well, most women are not getting enough foreplay, right? Like just straight up. The average time in the US is like 3 to 10 minutes, and the average woman needs 30 to 45. So just straight up, like most of us are not getting most of the types of arousal that women need. We don't even have mention in, if you even get sex ed in this country, there's no mention of women's arousal. I've never met a single woman who's had any sexual education that mentioned anything about the clitoris really and the structure, which was only mapped in 2005. And still most people don't realize there's this whole internal structure. It's really beautiful. If you haven't seen it, please look it up, Google it, clitoris structure. But just the tip that we see is just the tiny, it's like a tip of an iceberg. There's an entire structure that goes, up to 9 centimeters into the body. And just understanding the basis of how women's arousal works, figuring out also just what you like, what kind of touch you like, where, when, random, how you like it to feel, feeling entitled to ask for it, right? Feeling entitled to get it and ask for it often enough that your partner can kind of internalize that, right? Sometimes we're so scared to ask that we kind of do it like sideways once and then we get mad that they don't understand, but people need a lot of repetition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And just having patience with ourselves, not worrying about I see so many women, they're people pleasing with like, well, I can't take that much time. Like I take too long, right? Or, you know, this is really just for him if it's a heterosexual couple, right? And I should want sex more, right? Well, why should you? Especially if it's never been for you and you've never really gotten what you wanted, maybe because you just don't know yet, because we're not encouraged to know about our own bodies. We're not encouraged to be sexual beings for ourselves. The whole culture says that we're supposed to be sexual beings for men and not for our own pleasure. So of course we have sexual repression.
Yeah.
It doesn't even make any sense. I have so many women that come to me saying, I have low libido. It must be my hormones, right? 99% of the time, it's not their hormones, right? There's so many other reasons, but a lot of them are oftentimes because you don't know what turns you on and you're definitely not getting it, right? And you maybe have been having some obligation sex for a long time, which is actually kind of a real rift between ourselves and our own bodies. Because what it's doing is we're not showing up for our own boundaries. We're doing something out of obligation for somebody else. And eventually our bodies will start kind of shutting down because of that.
And I feel like in those what you just explained, it almost sounds like sex then becomes a feeling of self-betrayal.
Yeah, it can. And there can be real subconscious resistance to sex because of that, because there's a part of us that knows that we're not doing it for us. And it's like, I'm not going to do that because there's the should in there, right? Like I should. And then there's the little rebel part of us. Thank God for her, right?
Yeah.
She's there for a reason. She's a protector.
Yeah.
The little rebel part is like, no, 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 no. We're going to exercise a no here. But it's doing it by just sort of shutting us down because it's all subconscious and we're not really opening up and figuring out, okay, what is happening for me? What is mine, right? And what do I need to give back to socialization? How do I get myself free? And that's basically what I do with people is I help them figure out how to self-liberate.
Yeah.
And follow their own wisdom. And we do it through play because it doesn't have to be horrible. It doesn't have to be this like soul wrenching. I mean, sometimes there's tears because there's grief there and that's good, clean tears, right? Clean grief that needs to come out when we haven't shown up for ourselves, but it can be fun.
I think you two things came up for me while you were talking. And one was that I think in a relationship, as much compassion as you hold for yourself while you're learning through this, right? Because this is a lot of learning and unlearning. I think you have to have a certain amount of compassion for your partner as well, especially because, and I'm just talking about like in a healthy heterosexual relationship. I'm not talking about like, anything that makes you feel unsafe. But in a healthy heterosexual relationship, I still don't even believe that men are ultimately taught about connecting or intimacy. It's almost like sex is something you do to a woman, not with a woman, right? So there's a big disconnect there. So I feel like having those conversations is important, especially like being able to embrace that conversation and embrace the fact that we both have a lot to learn here, but we also both have a lot to benefit as well if we can walk this walk together, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to speak to that before I completely forget and just really highlight some of the stuff that you said because it's so important. I work with a lot of couples and I work with men too, and heterosexual couples, queer couples. But it is really important, and especially in a heterosexual dynamic, to understand how we are socialized differently by gender. And men are often looking for connection through sex because boys are socialized to suppress almost all of their emotions. The ones that they're really only allowed to have are the ones that women are not allowed to have. And those are anger and pride.
Yes.
So they're really encouraged to have those. And a lot of times things come out as anger when they actually might be grief or sadness or something. But because boys are not socialized to be allowed to have those emotions, it can be really hard for them to identify. And also a lot of times men are looking for emotional connection through sex. They feel like that is a time when they've been given permission to really be kind of vulnerable and connected with somebody in an intimate way. But that doesn't mean that they actually know any better than any of us do. None of us really get taught how to be intimate, how to be really seen and to be vulnerable with someone, to be seen in that vulnerability, to be seen in our full humanity, to be completely honest and authentic. And it's really brave. It takes a lot of courage, right? But we can practice and there's ways to get there. And really just understanding that gender socialization is important. And just because society has privileged men in general as a group doesn't mean men as individuals don't have all the like just aren't human beings, right? Of course, like with care and love and just also just cluelessness sometimes, just like the rest of us, and that we need to, help everybody understand how to connect. Ultimately, everybody wants the same thing, which is to feel connected and significant in some way, right? And so helping people figure out how to do that together is really joyful for me, and to help people figure out how to do that in play, because we're definitely not saying that like everything is the fault of any individual guy, right? But that we have a lot of gender socialization that's different, and men often do feel entitled to sex, and oftentimes are kind of taught. They get their information from porn most of the time.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily understand that that's entertainment made for men. That's not actually real women's sexuality.
Right.
And that's not how women actually respond. So men can get into kind of a habit of almost like masturbating with their partner, with their partner's body, instead of actually really connecting with their partner. But that doesn't mean that's what they really truly want. They may just not know how.
Right. It's like literally the only example that they've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to start with really kind of peeling back some of that stuff from everybody, just allowing ourselves to be real humans together, and then building, when given the opportunity to know what your partner really truly wants from you, like what kind of touch they want, what kind of words of affirmation feel sexy to them, how do they like to be flirted with? Like when given really specific instructions, I like the vast majority of men, unless they have like some pathologies or like some emotional dysfunctions, are really interested and excited to be able to do that for their partners.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, because I do think that the conversation around sex with women is usually like one-sided, in that they feel ignored and they feel neglected and they feel like, yes, he just wants this thing, but he doesn't want to connect with me. It's very disconnected from the actual intimacy, right?
Yeah,
Because intimacy is not just physical.
exactly.
So I love just the idea of being able to open up the conversation to saying, like, I know that there are things I don't know, and there are things that you don't know. And it is literally our job to learn these things together so that we can be better together.
Yeah, we teach each
love,
other how to love each other.
yeah,
Right? I
100.
can teach you how to love me better by
Mm,
learning what I need and
mhm,
communicating it honestly,
mhm.
and not pretending like it doesn't matter, not saying, oh, I'll just go along with stuff because this is what you want.
Yeah.
There's no intimacy there.
Mhm,
The people pleasing is not a favor in the relationship.
mhm.
It's an undermining pattern. It actually tends to create resentment. You can't help it. It's just a normal human pathway, right? When we do stuff for other people and we ignore our own needs and we don't show up for our own authentic selves, there will be resentment,
Yep.
right? And that is not a gift to any relationship. So
Right.
that sort of people pleasing pattern we were talking about for women, it's like sometimes it's real easy to feel almost martyred in it. Like, well, I'm doing all the things. Yeah, but could we cop to the fact that actually it's kind of a self-protection and you're not really showing up to say what it is you actually want and what you don't want?
Yeah.
And that would be more honest and allow more intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but it's hard. But we have to
Like,
practice.
there's like an extra layer of vulnerability there. But I also think it's a beautiful thing to be able to say, like, to my husband, if I could just sit and say to him, like, these are the things that, it's important for you to learn, but also like, I am committed to learning how to love you differently too, right? Like, what that just feels like a beautiful vow of
Yeah.
commitment to a deeper level of intimacy.
We want to explore these things together. I want to know what it is that feels good to you. What would you like more of? How could I help you feel the ways that you would love to feel in this
Yeah.
life?
Yeah.
How could we have that adventure together?
I love it. I love that. So how do you bring someone from everything that we just described, a woman who has been kind of raised and bred to believe that sex is one-sided, that sex is obligatory, that sex is shameful, that she shouldn't ask for the things that she wants, that, you should be a virgin when you get married, but you should also know what to do once you do get married. Like all these things that are in your head,
and that your body has to look this way, and that you're supposed to respond this way, and you're supposed to, you're not supposed to be sexual before marriage, but the second you get a ring on it, you're supposed to magically be hot for your husband all the time and like multi-orgasmic in 2.4 seconds. All this stuff is just not, I mean, we don't even have a robot that does that stuff, like let alone a human being.
Yeah. So how do you take
we all have it, even if it's not super conscious and obvious, we all still have those messages somewhere. But
how do you take someone who has all of that programming that is so confusing, all of that programming, and say, you can have the intimacy that you want and it can be learned through play? What does that journey look like for you when you're working with them?
Yeah, this is such a good question. Well, it's really somewhat individual. So there are some variations, but there's a lot of similarities and pillars, right? There's kind of an arc. And it depends on where the person's starting and kind of what are the stickiest messages that are really pulling on their souls and nervous systems. What is it that's triggering them? What is it that's really getting in the way? So we want to clear out any of the stuff that's getting in the way that's not theirs. So the shame, for example, shame is one of those things that it will poison everything. So we need to de-shame. There's great ways to do that. And we need to de-shame and just clear it out so we can get to any of the other stuff underneath. And really what we do is we pick apart and give back everything that's not theirs. So finding what is actually, and I do somatic work. So if I have somebody, I do it both over Zoom and then in person too. But if I'm working with a client in person, for example, we're working on something like finding your embodied boundaries. We actually, we do visualizations to help people feel like, okay, here's me, here's not me, and what do I want? And we sit there and wait. We do a lot of healing between a woman and her own body so that she can start listening to the messages from her body. Typically, what women are doing walking around in the world is we're sort of like a horrible parent to our body. We're telling our body, like, you should be this, you should be that, blah, de, blah. I'm going to restrict this about you. I'm going to, restrict that. I'm going to, force us to do this. And we're not listening. And then we wonder when we try to get to sex, why our body's not responding.
Yeah.
Our body doesn't trust us to have her back, to relax. So we're holding all this tension and sort of shame. We need to release all that. We need to start learning, okay, where is my yes? Where is my no? And the nice thing is, if you work with a coach like me, we can practice that in a safe container without having to involve your partner yet. Where the stakes with your partner feel really high. They feel like emotionally high stakes. But instead, for example, you and I could practice, all right, well, we're going to have you tell me something that you want and see if you can do it. And listen to then me affirming and have the experience of me enjoying you telling me what you want. We're going to practice having you telling me something you don't want and having me thank you for it. Thank you for telling me that. Now I know, what not to do so that I can love you better, right? We're going to maybe practice, if you're in person, we might practice with like, okay, what kind of touch does your hand like, right? What kind of touch does your hand want? And when is it too much? When is it enough? When do you need to say no? So there's this sort of process of reclaiming that happens. And then in couples, we can do a lot of play, and I can give homework and stuff for couples too, where there's a lot of sort of play-based exercises that just, we're not talking about kind of going straight to intercourse, right? We're talking about playing with intimacy together and figuring out how to communicate in that. We might even just be playing with kind of our own sexual energy. Can I bring it out and be seen in it in front of somebody? Can I show that I am feeling sexy and be seen in that? And, so there's all kinds of exercises that we do basically to help people move from that sort of repressed state of affairs to a more free state of affairs. But it's really driven by their own innate capacity. Everybody has this capacity, and it's like right there wanting to come out. We just
Mhm.
have to get all the shame and social messaging out of the way.
Yeah. Do you feel like that piece of it, that shame release, is that like one of the biggest barriers?
Shame is an emotion that makes us want to hide and isolate. And it's just, that's the function of shame. And it probably served a really great purpose once upon a time when, we all lived in small tribes that were really dependent on everybody. We all needed everybody. And we had a lot of accountability to each other. And we didn't shame each other just willy-nilly, but it was like, well, you can't hoard all the food that you find because that would actually kill people.
Yeah.
Right. So then shame, we see why shame feels like life and death, right? It's kind of this, it's built into us from just millennia of our own evolution. But now we live in a world with billions of people with very little accountability to each other, and shame's gone wild.
Yeah.
And we have so much diversity among people, and part of shame is deflecting blame. So if we feel bad about ourselves, we're going to deflect somehow into trying to make it about other people and not about us because we're trying to hide, right? So it's just this sort of like horrible feedback cycle where we get more and more shame if we don't catch on to it and say, actually, I'm not going to be part of that system. I'm not going to be judging people, and I'm going to not judge myself, because the more we judge ourselves, the more we judge others, and the same vice versa. The more we judge other people, the more we judge ourselves.
Yep.
So really breaking that cycle is important, and allowing ourselves to be normal humans with whatever challenges we have. And I see people with all kinds of things. They come in with, all these things that they might feel shame about, and they're every single one of them, it's so normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they haven't, they've been living with this and sort of like trying to shove it down for years, and it's taking a toll, sometimes even on their health.
I can imagine also that there's a part of your work that has to do also with allowing yourself like permission to just be present, right? I
Yeah.
think like our
Yeah.
minds are always 10 steps ahead of what we're doing in the moment. I have to do 35 more things before I pick up the kids or whatever.
Yep.
Or you're like, and that I'll say this for myself personally, when I was in my I wish I was smaller phase of living and I was hyper focused on what I looked like I know that I negatively impacted my intimate relationship because I was hyper focused on my body when
Mhm.
we're in the bedroom.
Yeah. How do I look in this moment? And I've had women who won't orgasm in front of a partner because they're worried that their face won't look pretty enough in
Wow.
that moment. So we're denying ourselves the pleasure that we have been given in this body, right? There's nothing else we own in this world besides the bodies and our experience in them, right? They're our home.
Mhm.
And we're looking for pleasure out in the world, these little dopamine hits from scrolling through social media, from drinking bottles of wine, from, whatever it is. We're looking for all that, but we have all this pleasure potential, but we're not giving ourselves permission to have it.
Mhm.
So to learn how to do that actually takes a little bit of practice, and we need to go kind of slowly to help sort of titrate in the tolerance of being present in the body.
Mhm.
It took me a long time. I've been hyperverbal since I was an infant, and I'm up in my head a lot.
Yeah.
And I was a scientist. I was up in my head problem solving all day. So it took me a lot to learn how to actually be present in my body and to downregulate my my sort of panic response to that of like, is this really for me? Can I have this? Is it okay? And could I relax? And can it be okay that I look however I look?
Yeah.
Right. So you're absolutely right. We have to learn how to do that.
Mhm.
Takes a little practice, but it's a birthright. It's your birthright to have pleasure in your body. And so it's just ready. It's your body wants that. Your body's right there ready to do it.
Yeah, I feel like that is also so much of the work that I do in just getting that your mind to slow down and let your body just tell you what it wants and needs, right? Because it
Mhm.
is always talking to us. We're just,
Yeah, your body doesn't lie.
no. And
It will always tell you the truth about your emotions if you are willing to listen.
yeah, yeah. I think it's just a matter that we've been programmed to ignore it.
Yeah, from the
That's
time you're a
what
little
it's
kid, right? Sit still, stop fidgeting, like all that stuff. And I mean, some of that's really well intentioned,
Mhm.
right? But it's still repressing we're just trained out of listening to our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that when you are working with a couple, do you feel like what they're going through is completely individual, or do you kind of bridge the work so that it is individual and as a couple simultaneously?
I would say both. It really depends on the couple. I often work with couples independently also, and then we come together sort of
Wow.
based on what the trajectory is of different people. So
Mm,
especially, for example, if I get a couple where one person feels a lot of pressure to be different, it's really helpful. And then the other person is kind of like frustrated. Maybe this is a really common dynamic. The other person might be frustrated that the other person hasn't like sort of fixed whatever it is yet. And then, but then this person is like, I'm under so much pressure and I'm going to disappoint my partner. And
mm,
I'm like, so it's really helpful to separate those healing processes in the beginning
mhm.
to help release some of that pressure and help validate each person, because it's so easy when you walk into a couple situation to think that, first of all, they automatically think I'm going to take somebody's side.
Yeah.
But like, because they think there is a side, they think one person is right and one person's not right. And that's never true. We have two valuable, wonderful human beings who just have a little set of different wounds, and they've got some different coping mechanisms that they've, come up with in life that have served them well, but maybe aren't serving them as well in their partnership right now. So separating those out, helping people understand them, understand their own coping mechanisms, figure out what it is that they really want, how can they connect authentically, and then come back together to have more vulnerable conversations from that place of self-awareness where they've already practiced a little bit with me and the trigger is not there so much, and I create the safe space for them to have a conversation that otherwise feels really scary. That's usually a helpful part of the process. And then we might work together mostly, or we might work individually a little bit here and there.
I can imagine that the work that you do in building this intimacy has to like pour over into other parts of the relationship as well. I can only imagine that the benefit just continues.
Yeah, I think with everybody, when sometimes intimacy feels like the last frontier, and it kind of did for me. Like looking at my sexuality was kind of the last healing frontier for me. It was the last part I wanted to look at. I wanted to fix everything else first. But it wound up being so profound because our relationship with our sexual energy is just life force energy, right? And when we are like suppressing or really disconnected from part of our bodies, it comes out in other ways in our lives. So I see people all the time. And for me, myself, when I was able to heal my relationships at like a very profound, intimate level, where now with my husband, we have like, we are completely honest with each other in a way. We've been together for 23 years and I've never been this honest. It is amazing. And it was very hard at first.
Mhm.
But I now know that whatever's happening for me, even if I'm being a total jerk, I know how to repair it with
Mhm.
him. And I know that he knows how to repair it with me. And it gives us this confidence to weather, to just be honest with each other and to weather whatever storm. Right. And it also, because I have a really good connection with myself now, and I have a good connection with my own sexual energy, and I don't shame myself about it, it means that I feel much more confident, just like, I could walk into a room and ask for whatever I want. And I think very few, you know, well, I kind of try to surround myself with a lot of women like that, but there's a lot of women who don't feel like that.
Yeah.
And when you heal your own sexuality, you also heal a lot of your power in the world. You
Mhm.
get a lot more power because there's not this part of you that you're disowning
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that like what you're saying also, I feel like you're only able to be really honest with your husband because you were finally really honest with yourself. Like
Mhm.
that's a big first step is even recognizing how much you deprived yourself of the really basic things that you wanted and needed for a very long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And it took a while. First, I was honest with myself, and then I didn't know how to be honest with him for a
Yeah.
really long time.
Yeah.
And when I finally did, it went a lot better than I expected because honesty is actually really relieving, especially if we can do it with kindness,
Yeah.
especially if we can If we can state our boundaries, if we can state our needs with some gentleness and kindness, and that takes a little practice sometimes, you know?
Mhm.
So I help people practice having hard conversations all the time because it's really nice to walk into them feeling confident. Like, oh, okay, I can do this. I did this already with Laura.
Yeah.
I can do this with my partner. I can say, maybe I can tell them, maybe I can finally tell them like what I really want, or I can finally tell them that I'm bisexual and I also want to date women, or I can finally tell them, that like I actually like I have all this pelvic pain that I've been hiding for years, right? There's all kinds of things that people hide from their partners, or just that I don't like the way that you stick your tongue in my ear. It could be really simple, but it can feel really intense, like, oh my gosh, they're going to hate me, or they're going to judge me, or they're going to break up with me, or like this, like it, because of the shame, it can feel really consequential.
Yeah. And it feels so, it does. It can feel huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Any little thing can feel really big. And so de-escalating that is really important.
Yeah. I love this conversation. I think that what you're doing is so important because like on this journey that we're all on of growing and evolving, I just think that it's so important to recognize the power that is, right?
Mm.
Like
Mhm.
and to be fully stepping into yourself is also to acknowledge your wants and needs and desires physically as well as emotionally. And even though we've been taught to suppress a lot of the parts of us that are powerful on the journey, the sensual, sexual, intimate side
Mhm.
tends to get ignored too. So I love that you're bringing that to the forefront because I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, and we want that, we want that so much for the next generation too. I would just love to see people having more open conversations, being more focused on, okay, what is it that I want and don't want, right? That's the beginning of consent. We're talking lately about, having more consent culture. Well, if you never take time to know what it is when you're a yes and when you're a no, there can't be
Yeah,
any real consent.
yeah,
So honoring that in ourselves and modeling it for people and really holding ourselves and our partners to those standards is so, so important for just the world at large.
I love it. I love it. I love the impact that you're making in this line of work. Um,
Thank you. I love yours
yeah,
too.
yeah, it's good. It feels good. It just feels good. Laura, if people are looking to connect with you, are you taking on more clients? What's going on with you?
Yeah, I have a couple spots open right now. I've just had a couple people graduate. So I do have some consultations available. They can go to my website, which is just my name, LauraJurgens.com, and book a consult. Or also just check out my podcast. I have a podcast called Sex Help for Smart People, and it's everywhere you get your podcasts. And really, it's just talking about intimacy and relationships and sexuality in a very open way with some practical exercises at the end.
I love that. And I love that you even provide the exercises because there's so much like we can be information gatherers
Yeah,
and
we can talk until our faces are
yeah,
blue and not implement at all,
exactly.
which is really common. So this is going to help get it into your life so you actually have transformation and change.
Yeah, hear about it and actually have something to do about it. I love that. So, Laura, before I can let you go, I have to ask you the question of the hour. And
Mhm.
that is in the Minding Mind community, we're all about being intuitive, being instinctual, everything outside of you that does not resonate with your inner self. That's minding yours. How does minding yours impact the legacy that you'll leave?
Yeah. So I think we might have touched on this a little bit, but I love that so much. I feel like that is really so powerful. The example that we set is
Mm,
so much more important than what we say. You know, the way we walk through the world, when you walk through the world that way, it's inspiring
mm,
and it's comforting and it helps people feel entitled to do the same thing. It helps people feel okay about choosing something that's good for them or choosing to say no in a moment where they need to, noticing their capacity, right? And I feel like that is just, it's an exponential impact on the world. So just walking through the world like that is a giant gift.
I love it. Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank everyone for joining myself and Dr. Laura today and tuning into another episode of Minding Mind. If this episode resonates with you, remember to comment, rate, review the podcast because your feedback helps me grow. And until next time, I want you to go live your life on your terms and mind your business. We will catch you in the next episode.